Hello, and welcome to Everybody Eats, a Washington Wizards podcast on the Blue Wire Network. My name is Varun. I'm the Wizards reporter for the Washington Post. The Wizards kick off their season in Milwaukee Wednesday, and this is my last show before then, so I wanted to get some stuff on the record by making predictions. Joining me to do so was senior NBA writer for The Athletic and former Wizards beat reporter Fred Katz. We each made 3 predictions and then answered a couple mailbag questions. Before we get to that, if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and if you're listening on a podcast platform, please leave a 5-star review. It was a great conversation with Fred. Let's get to it right now. Joining me now on the Everybody Eats podcast is Fred Katz, senior NBA writer at The Athletic and former Wizards beat reporter. Fred, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. The Wizards start their season Wednesday night against Milwaukee Bucks. We are recording Monday afternoon. I've asked each of us to come up with 3 predictions for this upcoming Wizards season, and I asked us to order them from most confident in these predictions to least confident. We're also going to do a couple mailbag questions at the end, time permitting. Let's start with this. What's your most confident prediction ahead of this Wizards season?
My most confident prediction is that at least one of CJ McCollum and Chris Middleton will not be traded before the deadline.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to be able to trade both those guys. I'm not sure if both of them are going to be good enough to be able to justify their salaries. And even if they are, I think it's really difficult to move salaries that big during the season. I know obviously there's an objective to move an expiring salary that large, and the Wizards are obviously still very much in rebuild mode, tanking mode, however you want to call it. But I think it's really difficult to move that much money in season. If you put me on the spot, which you're not, but if you did, and you said, what's more likely, they move both those guys or neither of those guys? I think I would put my money on them moving neither of those guys before moving both of them. I just think it's going to be really difficult to move salaries that large in season. And there's a realistic chance they might be able to do it once, but to do it twice, you don't really see teams move that much money multiple times leading into a trade deadline. So as much as, kind of they're both very clearly on the block from the onset of the season, I don't know if they're both going to move.
I also had something very similar to this because I said if CJ McCollum or Chris Middleton are traded at the deadline and the Wizards get a first-round pick, that will be more because of the Wizards' salary that they are taking back in the deal than McCollum and Middleton. Just talking to a couple of people, it doesn't seem like either of them have a ton of trade value, in part because of the large money that they command at this point. Both of them are about $30 million salaries. They're expiring deals, but you still got to send someone out to make that money work, especially if you're the kind of contending team that will need them. I also think that there's some value, especially either of them, to be honest. There's value in having these guys late in the season to stabilize the offense because otherwise, there's a lot of Bub Carrington, there's a lot of Trey Johnson, there's a lot of A.J. Johnson running the show, and even if those players have some level of upside moving forward, it can get really dicey with young guards trying to manage games and manage teams for extended stretches without much infrastructure around them.
Do they want to stabilize the offense? I mean, you're around them more than me. Do they want the offense to be
that
stable?
It's like a functional environment for the players so that you can have some people develop and that you're not just playing unstructured, unorganized basketball all the time. I don't think you want it to be, it's not going to be a good offense no matter what, but I think that you want someone who's able to keep things moving on the right tracks, even if it's just for evaluation purposes, right? You want to make sure that you're getting guys the ball into spots that you want to evaluate them in.
Right. That's a good point. And you want adults in the room. And both those guys... Exactly. Both those guys are going to be adults in the room. The thing is, Middleton makes about 34 this year. McCollum makes about 30 this year. The only way that you're getting back something good for them is if you take on undesired long-term money.
Exactly.
Like you're not trading Middleton for something good because you're trading Middleton. You're trading Middleton for something good because you're taking back long-term money the other team doesn't want because of whatever their financial or their team building situation is, and they're willing to throw on an extra draft pick in order for you to take on that money. Now, if I were negotiating with the Wizards for what it's worth, I would be trying to use their own logic against them. I would be saying to them, well, you guys just gave up an extra year of Jordan Poole's $30 million salary and Sadiq Bey's salary, which actually brought it up to about 40. Poole was 30 something. And Sadiq Bey brought it up to 40. And that was worth the 40th pick in the draft for you guys. So we're going to try to foist an extra 30, $40 million on you for only second round picks and not firsts. And I don't think the Wizards would do it for just one. There's no way they would do it for just one. But if I'm another team, I'm going to say, hey, better you get something than nothing. And these guys just walk in free agency. Take your second round picks and leave it at that. And then the Wizards can decide if it's really worth having that money on their books or not. They have a ton of cap room in 2026. But one of the ways that you use cap room in 2026 is you can use it early. Mm-hmm. You know, you can use it at the deadline. You don't have to use all of it at the deadline, but you can eat into it at the deadline. So instead of going in with $90 million in cap room for next season, you're going in with $50 million in cap room for next season, because it's not like you're trying to sign a max player or anything like that using that cap room anyway.
Yeah, and I think that if it's just, one or even two second-round picks that the Wizards are getting back at this kind of deal, I do think that it's a situation where they say, we're fine letting these contracts expire and going into the summer with that cap space, because then we have the flexibility to do what we want at that point in time, and that can still include taking on bad salaries for potentially more than just a second-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, history would say you're right.
Yeah,
they've let a lot of these guys expire.
Yep, absolutely.
They've let a lot of these guys expire. They let Marcus Smart expire. They let Tyus Jones expire, and they've let a lot of these guys expire. They have no problem letting them walk. So I think you're correct. We'll see if they're amenable to a buyout. They've been amenable here and there to buyouts. I was surprised when they did a buyout with when they did who they do a buyout with Smart. Just now. With Smart, right? Of course. Like they let Brogdon expire, by the way. Like I was surprised when they did one with Smart. I kind of thought the organization would want to be like, you know what, we're going to hold on to this, have another adult in the room, try to find some value. But they did the buyout with Smart as a favor to Smart, and Smart obviously gave back a decent amount of money to save them the money. But this front office is all about extracting value however it can, and finding kind of optionality however it can. And I think it's going to be hard for them to find two worthwhile trades.
Agreed. My first prediction, and I would say that my confidence level here, I'd say medium confidence level, Keyshawn George will be considered the Wizards' best young talent after this season, but not after 2 seasons. I think that Keyshawn is a little bit older, which plays into this. You see that he was a little bit further ahead even of the other rookies when he got into the league last season. He blossomed late in the year, and I think he'll have a heavy role on offense this season, and he'll continue to have some pretty sizable defensive impacts as well. The steals, the blocks, they were all off the charts last season. I do think that his upside as of right now is pretty capped around like a third or fourth starter on a good team. Some people think it's more than that. I'm still holding out a little bit just because I don't think he's like that top tier of athlete. You can get away without that, and what we deem athleticism can change depending on how the player is able to leverage it. I'm kind of curious, where do you see Keyshawn's game topping out on the high end?
I mean, I think, look, you were talking about having adults in the room, and I think ultimately it's going to come down to like, what is his role? Is he more of an on-ball guy? Is he more of a guy who's able to play off of others? And right now, I don't think we really know that. Like, I'll tell you this. When I was prepping for this and I was like, what are my Wizards predictions? I was like, none of them are basketball predictions. Because this isn't a basketball team. Like, they're going to play 82 basketball games. But this is not a team put together to play basketball. This is a team put together to be a vehicle so that some team in the future can play basketball. And I don't really know on any of their young guys yet. I don't know what Keyshawn George's ideal role is going to be. I don't think the Wizards do either. They're in the learning period with all these guys. I don't know if Bilal Coulibaly is going to be just a really good defender. If he's going to be somebody who is able to attack the rim and pass, but not really a shooter. If he's somebody who you can put the ball in his hands as like a tertiary creator if you desperately need a pick and roll, or if he's somebody who you can just like side to side swing and you can play him with a point guard and he's able to do things and he's more of like a Philadelphia Andre Iguodala type. I don't know if he's going to be somebody who you want creating on the short roll like a Bruce Brown. Like I don't know offensively what kind of guy he's going to be. I don't know really what Alex R is yet. I think he's intriguing. He was intriguing when he had that stretch when he was hitting his threes in the middle of the winter last year, and he's intriguing as a rim protector. But ultimately, with this roster, like it's one of the only rosters in the league where I would say like nobody is untouchable. And the reason why nobody is untouchable is because I just kind of don't know. I wish I could give you a better answer on George. I like his game. I like his on-ball game. But right now, as a rookie, he was kind of an inefficient rookie operating in
absolutely inefficient, turnover heavy.
Yeah, operating in a situation which is really just going to turn out inefficient, turnover heavy rookies. So I think just like the Wizards, I'm kind of just in a wait and see. And like maybe there's something there with him. Maybe there's something there with Bub Carrington, but also maybe not. I don't really know yet. They didn't really play like a real basketball team last year.
What do you mean? Just in the sense of having that many young guys together?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, they were trying to lose. Not the players, but the organization was trying to lose. And they experimented a lot. And I give Brian Keefe credit a lot with a lot of the ways he experimented on defense. I thought it was cool, kind of stuff that he did with matchups. I thought he prepared them well defensively in terms of like knowing other teams' tendencies and that kind of stuff. Like I remember I actually wrote about this last year during the Knicks playoffs. Like the first team that started guarding Karl Anthony Towns with wings who were not like elite wings. You know, he was, Boston was doing it with Drew Holiday or, Jason Tatum or, you had Houston doing it with Dylan Brooks. But the first team that was like doing it with like a guy who's not considered to be like an elite defensive wing was Washington when they did it with Champagnie. Like that was really their first time doing that with Towns. So like they have these sort of interesting, innovative ways of doing it. But when you're a team that is a bunch of young guys that is kind of going out there and you're developing. You're trying to figure out what you have in these guys. The goal is not to win these games. The goal is to develop. And when you have that as the case, it can be hard to figure out how guys are going to be in environments that actually matter. I mean, you look at any team that's been in a tanking situation, you think like, oh, that guy might be a guy. And then you put him in a winning situation, you're like, okay, but what exactly is his role in this situation?
Yeah.
Because ultimately with someone like Kaishan George, I'm like, is he going to get to a point where he's going to be able to be good enough playing off of winning players? Because I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who like you give the ball to and he's at his best and also you're at your best when he has the ball. I think he's going to be somebody who's going to have to learn off of playing off of winning players. And it's the point that you made earlier about having some adults in the room and having competent guys who can just get people in the right spaces. Middleton can get you in the right spot, knows how to play, knows how to read a defense, knows how to run a pick and roll. Same thing with CJ McCollum. And, it's just, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. I know it's a totally unsatisfying answer.
But they're so early in their careers that's kind of why I made the prediction that I did, where I think at the end of this year, he's going to be the furthest ahead, but that's more a function of him kind of coming into the league a little further ahead. And then after that, you could tell me Trey Johnson takes a massive step in 2 years from now. You could tell me Alex Sarr kind of puts it together. Bilal Coulibaly figures out the jump shot. Or someone they draft in the 2026 draft could look really great. Who knows? Yeah. What's your next prediction?
My next prediction is I went easy with it and I went over unders. And whatever the Wizards under is, I'm under.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Wizards fans. I'm sorry. This is just, it's hard to talk about the Wizards. I went on a podcast like 2 months ago with Zach Lowe. and I was talking about all the Wizards, the really good job they've done with asset accumulation, how they've done a really good job kind of structuring trades a particular way and making sure they can get extra trade exceptions out of it, making sure that they, take a flyer on Cam Whitmore, like all of these sorts of things, like the way they looped the Cam Whitmore trade into the Jordan Poole trade so they could maintain a trade exception. That was really smart. They've done a lot of these really good things. But again, these are not like Zach the whole time was being like, can we actually talk about basketball? And it wasn't a Wizards podcast. So Zach's point could have just been, can you talk about any of the other 29 teams? But I do feel like anything that matters with the Wizards doesn't have to do with the basketball this year. It just doesn't really have to do with the basketball this year. We might see improvement from some of their young guys, but ultimately what's going to happen is the Wizards are going to try to lose. They have a top 8 pick that is owed to New York, and the issue with the top 8 pick that's owed is it's not just about keeping that pick so they can have it. It's because they have a swap with Phoenix.
Yep.
And if they don't actually keep their pick, then they lose the swap with Phoenix. And that swap with Phoenix could be actually used. Like Phoenix could have a higher pick than them, especially with the new flattened lottery odds and how, Dallas just unexpectedly won the lottery with less than a 2% chance of winning the lottery. When you have those new lottery odds, it makes it so you have to do whatever you can to keep that pick. So they're going to keep that pick. It's going to turn into 2 second-round picks. And in order to make sure that they keep that pick, they're going to make sure that they lose a ton this year. And I am just going Wizards under as my second one.
On that point with the Wizards losing, that is by far the most important part about their season. I think there's a lot of other things that are important. Alex Sarr needs to take a step. Trey Johnson needs to look pretty decent. The players on this roster that they've invested in need to look good, but nothing matters more than keeping that 2026 first. And I have a piece coming out of the Washington Post that basically goes and looks at the other teams around the NBA that could scuttle the Wizards' opportunities, or at least are in the race to the bottom with the Wizards, and some of the unlikelier teams that could find their way there if things don't break their way. My last prediction, and this is the one that I have the least confidence in, is that the Wizards finish with the top 25 defense. Now, I said top 25 very intentionally because my guess is that it's probably going to be like 24 at best or 23 at best. But, if you look at a very, like a 6-week stretch last year, from February 1st to March 16th, the Wizards were 15th in defensive rating. And it wasn't really skewed by three-point shooting. That was about average. They did much better at the rim, and they did much better at the rim even without Alex Sarr for a bit. And then when he came back, they allowed, so that about a 2-week stretch from the beginning of March to the middle of March, they allowed the second most shots at the rim, but allowed the 5th best field goal percentage at the rim. And that's telling me that Alex Sarr kind of put things together for a brief minute there. And I think that he looks a lot stronger. He's playing with a lot more aggression on both ends. And I can really see him cementing himself as a decidedly above average defender in this league, even something that I think he showed flashes of last year, but it was still way too inconsistent. I think not having Jordan Poole, not having Kyle Kuzma should also help with that. I think the veterans they have now, while a little more physically limited with Chris and CJ, are really smart players, could help on that end. And I also think that a full season of Keyshawn George playing the way he did late last season could also be helpful. I don't think this is particularly likely, but I do think it's possible.
That I have to say, that's the most depressing one.
It is. I tried saying top 20 defense, and I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
That is really the most depressing one. That is unquestionably the most depressing thing that you could have ever said.
Yeah.
Sarr got better. Sarr got better defensively throughout the season. I thought he did a good job around the rim. He's got to work on his hands. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really a thing where he's got to work on his hands on both sides. But what the Wizards have done, which is interesting, is they've drafted a decent amount of guys who I feel like have a chance to be really good. They have like good role player skills. Mm-hmm. And that's part of what I mean when I say they're not really a basketball team, is they have a bunch of guys who could develop into real role players who now have to kind of run a team. And that's not a recipe for things to look the way that you want them to look. if Sara ends up being a guy who can shoot the three and who can protect the rim, that's an incredibly valuable combination. And for all the talk of it being a positionless league and whatever else, there are still very, very, very few players in the NBA who are plus rim protectors and plus 3-point shooters. There's a reason why Milwaukee moved heaven and earth for Miles Turner, who is a 0 times All-Star and a 0 times All Defensive player. If you can protect the rim and you can shoot the three, you can change everything. There's a reason why Boston finally won its title after it traded for Kristaps Porzingis. Like Wizards fans saw that during the Kristaps year. It changes everything if you've got a guy who can shoot the three and who can protect the rim. And I think Sarr has real potential there to do something good. I believe they were giving up fewer shots around the rim when he was in games last year also by like a decent margin during the second half of the season, which I thought was promising. You could kind of see him affecting shot selection a little bit more. That was a really nice, encouraging thing. Should I go on to my final prediction?
Let's do it. You can't be more depressing than mine.
It's not more depressing.
Okay.
I wouldn't classify it as depressing. I would classify it as it's probably the hot take that people will care the least about.
Okay.
I said it to a cap guy when I was talking to one recently, and they were like, "Ooh, that's a hot take," and I was like, "This is only a hot take to cap guys." My prediction is the Wizards will acquire at least 4 second-round picks before the trade deadline. They will net, and by the way, they will net at least 4 second-round picks. Not like if they acquire 4, they'll give out 0. If they acquire 6, they'll give out 2. They will net at least 4 second-round picks, which would be a lot at a trade deadline. That would be a lot at an in-season trade deadline, and I think they're going to find ways to do it, whether because they end up trading McCollum or they trade Middleton. I think they have other guys on their roster that they can end up trading, and they also have, like I mentioned, they have a Kelly Olynyk trade exception. They have full use of the mid-level exception, which they can use as a trade exception as well. They have a Jonas Valanciunas trade exception, which they can use because they don't have to worry about the hard cap, even though it was created in a different season. So they can take in this money and they can say, give us 2 second-round picks. I think they're just going to use the season to gobble up future assets, and I think they're probably going to be like, give us as many second-round picks as you possibly can in all of these deals. And I think they're just going to. They're going to be one of those teams like there's some teams like Charlotte just has so many second round picks. Like I think they're going to be one of those teams where they're going to be like we are just you're consuming second round picks. Just throw them at us and they will stick to us. And I think that's what they're going to end up doing, because I don't know if there's like a realistic in-season way for them to get a first. And then next year, when they have control of their own first-round pick back, they can kind of start doing this the way that they want to do it because they control their own draft history moving forward.
How do you think that changes, being able to control their own pick? How do you think that would change how they approach things?
Well, I mean, the whole reason why they're tanking as hard as they're tanking is because they don't have control of their first-round pick. Because they're not good enough to be able to lose a first-round pick. They have to be able to get it. On top of the fact, they have all those swaps with Phoenix.
Yeah.
So once they have control of their first round pick, they're going to have control of their swaps with Phoenix. And that is going to be huge because Phoenix is in the worst place in the league moving forward. I mean, Phoenix has no control of its own first round pick until I think 2032. And part of the reason is because the Wizards got all those swaps in the Bradley Beal deal. And that's going to be huge for them. Phoenix is, 25, 30 win roster right now? Yeah. Doesn't really, we'll see what like Malawach ends up being. We'll see if Mark Williams stays healthy. But that's not a roster that anybody envies. And they don't really have the means to acquire any, future awesome young guys unless they make an unbelievable pick at, the second round or at number 27 or whatever else. The Wizards are one of the teams, the Wizards, the Rockets, they have invested in betting against the future of the Phoenix Suns, which seems to be a good investment. And so they'll be able to have their own picks. They'll be able to have those control those swaps as well. And then they can start to like build out the team and have an actual team that starts to make more sense moving forward. And I think that's what they'll do once they get full control of their pick back after this year. I think starting next summer, you'll see them start to make more trades and more signings and more moves, more in-season moves. You'll see them start to operate more with kind of an eye on more of a regular rebuilds than it just being like still in the bottom part of the teardown.
Yeah. One thing you said earlier about the Wizards having a bunch of players who are ideal role players in a lot of senses really stuck out to me, because these pieces all start to make a lot more sense if you have the centerpiece for the role players to play off of. And whether that comes in the draft, which I still think is probably the most likely outcome, because the Wizards have not gotten the chance to draft, I think, a true blue chip talent in the draft yet. Even when they got the number 2 pick, it was in a class that people considered weaker, the one where they got Sarr. And, they dropped a 6 last year. They don't get the chance at a guy like Flagg, a guy like Harper. And it does seem like it's so early. The college season has I don't think it's even started yet, but if one of these guys shows up to be that guy, or 2 or 3 of these guys shows that they're a blue chip talent in that way, it could make things start to click into place much more easy as the years go on.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a world in which they're doing this in reverse. I think the front office has made the right moves along the way. Like, this is just generally what tends to happen when you're in a rebuild and you're starting over. This is kind of what tends to happen. And there's a world in which they're doing it in reverse. A lot of the time when you see a rebuild, you see team stinks for X number of years, 1 year or 4 years or whatever it is. And then they draft a star with the number 1 pick or the number 3 pick or whatever it is. And then they start to build around that star, and they bring in role players. They bring in a number 2 through the draft or free agency, whatever else. And that's how they build themselves up. And there's a world in which the Wizards just did it in reverse, where they get the number 1 pick or the number 3 pick in next year's draft, and that guy ends up being awesome. And now you've got Koulibaly, who I'm very confident that he's a very good defender. He's clearly a very good defender. That one is for sure. The jury's out for me on him offensively. At the beginning of the year last year, he had a really nice run, I thought. Like, I got really excited about him actually at the beginning of last year, because as a rookie, he struggled so much as a finisher around the rim, and he started finishing through contact so much better at the start of last year. And then it kind of regressed a little bit throughout the course of the season. There's flashes, there's stuff there. We know he's really good offensively. He's got a high processing speed. He's smart. I think you can bet on smart, intelligent people figuring out how to fit into roles. Sarr has really good role player traits. George could be really nice in that role. Carrington has a lot of talent. Trey Johnson, who we haven't discussed, I mean, can shoot the hell out of the ball.
Shooting is a great role player skill.
100%. And maybe he won't be a role player.
Maybe he's more. Exactly, yes.
Maybe he's more. Maybe he's really good. But there's a world in which the Wizards are kind of building this in reverse, which is kind of interesting too. And maybe they have a lot of the guys who will be there when they are a good team, and it's just that we haven't seen those stars yet. It's just that the stars, the surefire star, is the hardest one to acquire. And there's a world where if you don't get that guy this year or something, like next year, Koulibaly is extension eligible. 2 years from now, Sarr is extension eligible. George is extension eligible. Carrington is extension eligible. Like, you're going to have to start making financial commitments to these guys. And if you don't have the roster, if you don't know if those guys are going to be part of the long-term core, that's when you start to think, okay, what do we do here? Because we don't have the evidence in order to commit to these guys financially, to commit to this core financially. And that is what will be interesting about them moving forward. It's also why I say no one's untouchable. This is a front office that I think will be very not practical. I think they're
Pragmatic?
pragmatic. See, this is why you're at the Washington Post. Pragmatic. That is exactly the word. I think they will be very pragmatic in terms of choosing who's there and who's not. And I'm not saying I don't think any of the young guys get like dealt or something this season, but at some point it's just like contracts force you into those decisions, especially in the modern NBA. Like Michael Winger came up through cap management. Like that was his forte, cap management and counsel. And you don't want these contracts that are 25, 28 million, and it turns out they're not good deals. Like those hamstring you like crazy. Those are the ones that end up being like the Andrew Wiggins deal in Miami. And those can really, really hurt you. You don't want to hand those out because you fell in love with your own young guy and all of a sudden he actually doesn't work on the actual construction of the team you were looking for. So they've got to figure out exactly how these guys fit moving forward. And, they did a really good job with like the Kispert extension. Mm-hmm. They did a really good job with the Denny Avdia extension. Those are great team numbers, and they really played hardball with those extensions. Mm-hmm. And I imagine as long as they are still kind of a bottom of the barrel team, then they're going to take that same approach to negotiations. Like that Denny Avdia deal is one of the best deals, one of the best contracts in the league. He's just a good player on a really good contract. And Kispert, it was a similar thing where it was like it came down to the last second. The reason why was because the Wizards had a number. They were like, we're not going to come off of this. This is what we believe makes sense for us given our situation. We need to make sure, just in case, that you're on a tradable number, just in case. And Kispert was like, you know what, I'll take the financial security in order to take it. Corey Kispert's a good player who could help any team.
He's a good player. Yeah,
absolutely. He's just a good player.
Wizards fans are a little tired of him now, and I think that's mostly a familiarity thing, but he is a good player. He is a defined positive force on your team. Even if the defense is a problem, the offense is so good and so connective.
And he could fit anywhere. And I'm not 100% convinced the defense is a problem. Because Corey Kispert's a pretty smart defender. And when you put somebody who doesn't necessarily have massive physical tools on defense inside a defense with a ton of young players who are still learning how to play, they're going to look bad. It's going to accentuate how they look. It's going to be like when, God, I'm not going to compare Corey Kispert to Kyle Korver. There's just no way I'm going to compare him to Kyle Korver. I was going to say it's going to be like when Kyle Korver was younger in his career on like, Nets teams, and people were like, he's a bad defender. And then he goes to the Bulls and he's playing on the Bulls and he's playing on those Hawks teams. And it's like, damn, that guy can, actually really guard. He's a good team defender. I hate that I just compared him to Kyle Korver. God, I'm such a doof. It's the laziest comparison in history. Literally only because of the hair. But I'm not convinced that Corey Kispert is just a flat out not good defender. I'm not. He, on the other side, by the way, is not just a shooter. Like he is a fabulous cutter. Mm-hmm. He's a really fabulous cutter, and he's great moving off the ball. You can have him flare to the 3-point arc. He causes tons of gravity. He notices when defenders fall asleep. He's a good basket cutter. Like he knows how to screen and get himself open that way.
He's
like
a great screener.
Yep. Corey Kispert's just a good basketball player. And that is a very tradable contract. And if you're a team that needs a movement shooter and you feel like that's what you're missing, you're going to call the Wizards and check in on Corey Kispert and be like, what's it going to take for this guy? That's a very reasonable contract. And the Wizards played hardball on that contract, and Kispert decided to opt for the security. So I think they'll probably have to take that strategy until they have a better understanding of like, this is our core moving forward and this is the vision. Because right now they've done a great job accumulating assets and they haven't really missed on any players. I mean, you said it totally right. Like they had the number 2 pick in a year where you don't want to have the number 2 pick. It's not their fault. But that's the way that it worked out. It's very Wizards.
It's very
Wizards to have the number 2 pick in a year where you don't want to have the number 2 pick. It's exactly what Wizards fans have had to deal with their whole lives. That sort of horrible luck that just nobody could do anything about. They've done a good job putting this team together. They're just still in the blueprint stages.
Yeah, yeah. I know you have to run. Do you have time to answer one mailbag question?
Make it 2.
Okay, all right. YS0Y on Reddit asks, "Hey Fred, awesome to have you back on a Wizards pod. 2019-20, the Wizards and Knicks finished with similar records. You fast forward, the Knicks were in the conference final last year, the Wizards are in a full rebuild. How did both teams, neither of whom had a clear path to improvement in 2019-20, get to the spots where they are now?"
All right. I'm trying to remind myself. Okay, well, the answer is the Knicks cap sheet was way cleaner. That's really the answer. The Wizards cap sheet wasn't clean. The Wizards had the John Wall max contract. They had the Otto Porter max contract. No,
I think they got it off Otto at that time.
But they had gotten off of Otto. Sorry, they got off of Otto in 2019. Yeah, they got off of Otto in 2019. And they had not yet re-signed Bradley Beal to a 35% max contract with a no trade clause. And when you give out those sorts of ginormous contracts to players who don't live up to those contracts, on top of the fact that you have the no trade clause, that's what happens. I think the other part of it is that Tom Thibodeau did an incredible job with the Knicks, just creating a culture and turning those guys into a winning organization. The Knicks also signed Jalen Brunson, and
pretty important.
The Wizards did not. And the Knicks had control of their draft picks, and the Wizards haven't ever since they traded John Wall for Russell Westbrook, which honestly was a fine trade. Like,
worked out.
They felt like they had to get off of Wall. Westbrook had a really good year for them. They ended up turning Westbrook into Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell and broke them up into a million different pieces. And that helped their cap situation moving forward. But the Wizards were kind of in cap hell to begin with. I mean, even that year before, 18-19, they were coming out of, 18-19, they're coming out of a 41-win season. And they move into that 18-19 season. I think it was Leonsis predicted them to win 50 games going into that season. They ended up losing 50 games because that's the year that John Wall ends up playing through bone spurs and tears his Achilles. But they got off to an awful start even before that. And that team began the year way into the luxury tax. Like, their cap sheet just wasn't clean. They ended up getting out of it with the Porter trade and with some other moves. With the Porter trade, with the Markieff Morris for Wesley Johnson trade. There's your deep cut for you. But ultimately, a lot of this just comes down to how clean is your cap sheet. And you can tell, man, I'll tell you what, as a reporter, like, free advice for any reporter listening to this, or any wannabe reporter listening to this. A great way to be able to get news is to know teams' cap sheets so well that you can just kind of like predict what they're going to do. Like when the Wizards made, when I was covering the Wizards and they made the Westbrook to the Lakers trade, it was at the time the biggest trade in NBA history in terms of number of teams. It was 5-team trade, and it was the most like moving pieces in terms of players, picks, draft rights, guys. There were parts of that trade that I broke, like small parts that just like, Shams and Woj didn't give a crap about. Like Nikola Milutinov's draft rights going from San Antonio to Brooklyn. And I think I had Chandler Hutchison going to San Antonio. I think I broke that. And the way I got Chandler Hutchison going to San Antonio was I sat down, I did the math, and I'm like, there are only so many ways that this trade can work. Like, the Wizards have to be including Chandler Hutchison. And where can he go? Okay, he can go here. So you call up and you're like, okay, well, there are only like 2 options here. I don't remember what the other options were. You're like, there are only 2 options here. And it's probably this one. So I'm just going to call and be like, I did the math. It's got to be this. And I do this with trades all the time, with stuff when I'm trying to break things or whatever else. It's gotta be this place just based on the math. You can tell so much about a team from just by looking at their cap sheet. And the Wizards cap sheet in 2020 was much more flawed than the Knicks cap sheet. The Knicks in the summer of 2019, that was when Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving signed with the Brooklyn Nets. And the Knicks were obviously after those two guys. And then eventually they get word they're not going to get them. And what did they do? They gave 2 guaranteed years to Julius Randle. And then they signed a bunch of guys to 1-year deals. So that way their cap sheet stayed clean moving forward. And they ended up, for the most part, really being very cognizant of the margins. I would say this Wizards front office is extremely cognizant of the margins. And that's why when I went on Zach's podcast 2 months ago, like I was talking about, I can't remember if we were potting or that was before the pod, and I was ranting about the Wizards trade exceptions and how important they are. It's because this is the first step. You need the clean cap sheet. And if you have not just a clean cap sheet, but an advantageous cap sheet, that's your foundation. That is what can turn you into something. You cannot turn yourself into something great if you don't have that first. That's got to be the foundation. It doesn't guarantee you're going to turn yourself into something great, but what it does is it lays down a foundation for you potentially to turn yourself into something great if you make the right moves along the way. Otherwise, you're just going to hamstring yourself. And the Wizards cap sheet was problematic.
Suboptimal.
And their picks were problematic, and that John Wall contract weighed them down, and the Bradley Beal contract weighed them down. Part of the reason why the Wizards didn't start a rebuild until late was because they didn't want to start a rebuild until late. Some of it is just desire. They didn't want to start the rebuild till late. Wizards fans, the entire time that I was covering the Wizards fans would be like, why won't they just break it down? They didn't want to start the rebuild until late, so they didn't start the rebuild until late. They didn't start the rebuild till they ended up trading Bradley Beal. So I think all of that is the reason why. And when you compare them to the Knicks specifically, it really helps that you sign a very good point guard in Jalen Brunson to a 4-year, $104 million deal, and then he turns into a top 10 player. That's not a common thing, and it's not a replicable thing. I don't think you can be like, oh, we'll just sign a guy who's like a top 15 point guard, and then he's going to become a top 10 player. That is not a replicable thing. That is just a dude being a late bloomer and becoming a superstar somewhat unexpectedly. And similar thing with Julius Randle, by the way, where Randle had never been an all-star and became a 3-time all-star with the Knicks, where they really developed him. So I think it's all those things.
Yeah, I mean, the Brunson thing, the cap sheet is so important, but then getting Brunson, and then you compare that to the Wizards signing Beal to that extension, and him being pretty good for a couple years and then falling off pretty precipitously after being traded away. That's how you have these two divergent paths for these teams. Wiz Weekly on Twitter and Improbable Planet on Reddit ask, what should be the Wizards' plan with the cap space available next season? Two commonly offered paths are taking on more bad deals for picks or signing vets to speed up the rebuild. What needs to happen this season for them to pick path B?
Path B would be signing vets?
Yeah. Doing something akin to the Rockets signing, Dylan Brooks and Van Vliet.
What needs to happen for them to do that? A lot of the young guys need to show that they're ready to be on a competitive team. A lot of the guys that we've talked about in this podcast need to show legitimate progression. They need to probably piss off the front office just a little bit by winning a few too many games. Another way is if Ted Leonsis says, from everything that I've heard, Ted Leonsis is very much on board with everything they've done. I have heard, as a matter of fact, not only have I not heard that Ted Leonsis is putting any pressure on them to move, speed through this. I've heard the opposite. I've heard from that he, everything that I've heard from Leonsis, that he's fully on board with the way that they're handling this, and that he is fully backed this kind of slower, more as you so eloquently said, pragmatic rebuild. But if Leonsis changes his mind, ownership is always a factor in that stuff, and ownership was a factor in the Houston stuff. You gotta win something. You gotta save your job. You got to win something to save your job. It's been too bad for too long. You know, Houston was the other part of it. People compare it to the Houston thing. I want to be nice. I mean, Silas really struggled there. Steven Silas was the head coach there in Houston, and he really struggled. That team was not disciplined by any stretch of the imagination. The only thing that that team was good at statistically was they got a lot of offensive rebounds. And the only reason they got a lot of offensive rebounds was because they indiscriminately charged the offensive boards after everything. And they were the single worst transition team in the history of transition defense. They could not guard in transition because they all just ran at the hoop. They just ran after the basketball, like just see the ball, go after the ball. And that was the whole thing. That team really didn't play with any discipline. And it was Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood and a lot of guys who were just kind of like trying to get their own shots. And they needed adults in the room in a different way than the Wizards need adults in the room. The Wizards need adults in the room because they're young and young people learn from wiser people. The Rockets needed adults in the room because it was like, this is not how this game is supposed to be played. And that was the big difference. I will say, I don't think this has to be an either or situation.
Agreed.
I think the Wizards have so much cap room this summer that you can take on some unwanted salary and you can sign some vets. And some of the salary that's unwanted that you take on can still be good vets. Like, they could still be good players. Keep in mind, we're in an age with the NBA today where, like, there are teams that just have to get off of money because of apron issues, because of tax issues, whatever else. And just because a team is desperate to get off of money, it doesn't necessarily mean that that player is like some awful player for the money. It's not like it doesn't have to be a situation where that player is just horrible for the money. We see that kind of stuff happen all the time. I mean,
look at the exodus from Boston this year, right?
Exactly. 100%. Kristaps Porzingis is a really good player on an expiring contract, and Boston has to get rid of him. You know, look at even just like what happened in Milwaukee. Like Pat Connaughton is just like a good, nice role player on a totally reasonable deal, but Milwaukee needed to get off of money. And their only way of getting off of money in order to make the Miles Turner thing happen was they had to weave and stretch Dame Lillard. They had to get under the apron so that they could then get under the cap so they could then use cap space to sign Miles Turner. And so they end up like sending off Pat Connaughton. Perfectly solid player. Charlotte takes him in, though, because they need it to happen. If two teams who are both over the first apron want to make a trade, by definition, without exception, you always need an extra team that either has cap space or a big enough exception to take on extra money, because a team over the first apron is not allowed to take in more money than it gives out in the trade. And by definition, if your two teams are making a trade and only two, one of them is going to have to take in more money than the other, unless you're trading two guys who make the exact same salary, which is realistically never going to happen. So there are a lot of scenarios in which the Wizards could step in and be like, oh yeah, we'll take that money off of your hands. And it's not bad money. And they might even get an asset out of it. And there are scenarios where they might be like, yeah, we'll take that guy off your hands, and it is bad money. And then they also might be able to sign a guy or two and be like, let's see if we can win 38 games. Now, the question is, why would they want to win 38 games? You know, there's a difference with Houston and with the Wizards, which is that Houston had a lot of picks. And they did have a lot of young guys that they felt good about in terms of like being like real guys moving forward. And so they had the ability to be like, they knew that eventually they didn't know they were going to trade for Kevin Durant, but they knew that they suspected they were going to trade for Kevin Durant. I mean, Woj retired over a year ago, and Woj reported the reason that they were going after Phoenix picks in that Nets trade before the Mikal Bridges trade, 16 months ago, was because they were using Phoenix picks in order to target Kevin Durant for when he became available. But they knew they were going to go out, and that was before they won 50 some odd games. But they knew that they had these picks to be able to go out and bring in a big star, whether it was Kevin Durant, whether it was Giannis, somebody. They knew they were going to be able to go out and do that. I don't think the Wizards necessarily have that capital. The Wizards are going to have their own picks moving forward, which is fine. And they're going to have those Phoenix swaps, which is obviously great, but I don't think they're going to have that surplus that Houston did. So I think it's got to be handled a little bit differently.
That's why this year is so important,
we'll
though, right? Because if this year you don't have the same kind of surplus, you have a couple extra picks here and there, but not anywhere near a haul, and none of those are high value picks. But if this year you see decided steps from some of the young guys to the point that you could say, oh, these are legitimate building blocks, at least 2 to 3 of these guys, and then you could start, and then you get some lottery luck, and then maybe it makes more sense for you to kickstart things. Anything else you'd like to add about the Wizards?
No, you've got all my Wizard stakes.
There we go.
You've got all of my Wizard stakes.
Where can people find your work?
You can read my stuff on The Athletic. You can listen to my podcast, which, if you care, it's mostly a Knicks podcast. Katz and Shoot. You can subscribe at patreon.com/Katz and Shoot, or you can just read my around the league stuff over on The Athletic. Follow me on Twitter at Fred Katz.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Fred. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thank you so much to Fred for hopping on. Really great insight on the Wizards and the NBA. A reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please leave a 5-star review. You can follow me on most social medias using @ByVarun and find the show using the handles in the episode description. Check out my article in the Washington Post talking about the teams that could beat the Wizards in a race to the bottom. I'm excited for the season ahead. I'll talk to you guys soon.